We've been covering the issue of reparations as it makes headlines across the country. At the congressional level, House Bill H.R. 40 would create a commission to investigate the impact of slavery from 1619 to the present. It's named for the 40 acres and a mule promised to the formerly enslaved after the Civil War. At the state level, California has formed a task force that would study reparations for its black population. And at the local level, Evanston, Illinois approved the Restorative Housing Reparations Program this past March. It began offering qualified black residents $25,000 for repairs or down payments on a home. Across the country, talk about reparations is bigger than ever. Joining me now to separate the hype from the reality is my next guest. He is the co-author of the book, From Here to Equality, Reparations for Black Americans in the 21st Century. Dr. William Darity Jr., thank you for joining me here on Black News Tonight. Talk to me about this word reparations. It's been going around a lot these days, and I'm seeing bills here, some of which are attempting to repair damage done, some of which are attempting to right historical wrongs, some of which are attempting to piece together some kind of fix to structural problems. But the question is it really reparations?
Well, I have a very specific view of reparations, and it's a view that we outlined, Kirsten Mullen and I, in our book, From Here to Equality. We think that reparations must have four components. The first is it must establish who's eligible to receive reparations. And in our argument, we propose that it should be Black Americans who have ancestors who were enslaved in the United States. Secondly, the legislation that eventually gets developed should ensure that reparations plays the role of eliminating the racial wealth gap in the United States. The racial wealth gap is the primary and most powerful indicator of the cumulative effects across generations of white supremacy in this country. It would require an expenditure in the vicinity of $11 to $12 trillion to eliminate that gap. And once we focus on that objective, it becomes clear that many of these other tactics, proposals, plans that people are putting forward to be called reparations really don't function as reparations. The third attribute that a reparations plan ought to have is it should involve direct payments to the eligible recipients. And then fourth and finally, it needs to be a project that's conducted by the federal government. For two reasons. First, the federal government is the only level of government that has the capacity to meet the bill. If we took the combined budgets of all the state and local governments in the United States, including Evanston, Illinois, that would come to $3.1 trillion. But the amount that's required to eliminate the racial wealth gap is in excess of $11 trillion. So states and localities can't do it. The federal government can, and we are aware that the federal government can do it, in part because of our recent experience with the funds that were amassed to address the coronavirus crisis very quickly without raising taxes. But the other point that I'd like to make is that the federal government is the culpable party. It's the federal government that bears the legal and authority responsibility for the series of atrocities that Black Americans have been subjected to from the period of slavery into the present moment, where we have mass incarceration, police killings of Blacks who are unarmed, as well as ongoing discrimination in a variety of areas.
So for you, even if the states had the capacity to produce $11 or $12 trillion to meet reparations, there's another philosophical and moral issue at stake here. You would not support state-based reparations even if the funds were available. Is that accurate?
I would not be so inclined to do so in large measure because what would happen is I think that states would adopt very different programs. You were talking about the issue concerning states' restoration of control over the abortion rights. And that would eliminate kind of a unified project for reparations. So I think it's important, regardless of whether or not the states had the capacity to do it, that we do this as a federal project. This is a national responsibility.
a national responsibility. What form should this responsibility take? There are many debates, not just about whether or not reparations should be given, but what form they should take. Are we talking about a stimulus plan type of check sent out to the descendants of formerly enslaved Africans? Are we talking about free public education? What could reparations look like?
So let me say at the outset that indirect measures like scholarships for education are not going to turn the trick in terms of eliminating the racial wealth gap. It's noteworthy that the median black household head with a college degree has 2/3 of the net worth of the median white household head who never finished high school. So equalizing education or improving educational standards in the black community is not going to turn the trick in terms of addressing the racial wealth gap. And that's what must be the target of a reparations program. And as I mentioned a moment ago, it should be conducted in such a way that direct payments are made to eligible recipients, just in the same way that direct payments were made to eligible recipients under other reparations plans. Whether it was the German government's payments to victims of the Holocaust, or it's the United States government's own payments to Japanese Americans who were unjustly incarcerated during the course of World War II. There's no reason it should be any different for Black American descendants of U.S. slavery.
All right, I'm glad you picked that up. And when we come back, I want to talk to you about why it should only be for the U.S. descendants of American slavery, in your opinion. Dr. Darity, stay with me. We've got much more coming up with Black News Tonight. We're talking reparations here, and later in the program, we're talking about reparations around the globe. Stay with me. Welcome back to Black News Tonight. We continue our discussion on reparations with Dr. William Darity. Before the break, we talked about reparations and sort of what it would look like, sort of structurally, how it would come out of the federal government, how it could take the form of payments because of the critiques you had of thinking about it as just an educational intervention. All that makes sense to me. One question that comes up to folk, though, or rather one question that comes up for folks, though, is how do we decide who gets it? There's the logistical challenge of determining who is eligible for reparations based on their origin. But then there's this philosophical question that many people raise, which is, you know, if African people were dropped off in the Caribbean, if African people were dropped off, of course, in the United States, etc., why would we develop a reparations plan that is exclusively for the descendants of American slavery here? For example, if someone is a third generation person from the Caribbean, whose parents are from the Caribbean, and they're here right now and they're experiencing anti-black racism, they're experiencing the structural remnants of slavery, etc., why should they not be in the reparations discussion?
So they should be in the reparations discussion if they are a third generation individual who intermarried with somebody who is a descendant of persons enslaved in the United States. There's no question that their children would be fully eligible for reparations under the two criteria that Kirsten Mullen and I introduced in our book. The first criteria is a lineage standard. An individual would have to demonstrate that they have at least one ancestor who was enslaved in the United States. And then the second criterion is an identity standard. So for at least 12 years before the adoption of a reparations plan or the adoption of a study commission for reparations, an individual would have to show that they self-identified as Black, Negro, African American, or Afro-American. Now, why would we establish these conditions? Because of the specificity of the experience of Black American descendants of U.S. slavery in this particular country. The anchoring event that creates the debt that is owed to that descendant population is the failure to provide the formerly enslaved with the 40 acres of land grants that they were promised as restitution for their years of bondage. And at the same time, the federal government was giving 160-acre land grants to 1.5 million white families in the Western territories that set up the foundation for their wealth accumulation across generations, while Black Americans were denied the same opportunity. And so the consequences are evident today in terms of the current racial wealth gap. And that's something that we must address through a reparations program. And it should be specifically for the descendants of the individuals who were denied the 40 acres. Keep in mind, you've been talking about the situation with respect to the German atrocities that were conducted against the Herero and the Nama people in southern Africa. And they are bringing a claim before Germany, and that's a claim that is specifically theirs. They are not including Black Americans in their claim, nor should they. Similarly, in the context of the Congo, the Congolese are making claims on the Belgian government, and it's appropriate that they do so. So individuals who are more recent Black immigrants to the United States certainly have a reparations claim, but they have a reparations claim on the nations that colonized and enslaved their people. They do not have a claim on the United States government.
All right. There's a movement that has emerged in recent years out of this premise, right, that we should exclusively focus on reparations in the United States on those descendants of American slavery. We see the ADOS movement. We've also seen more recently the FBA movement, Foundational Black Americans. Where do you stand in relation to both of those movements?
Well, I agree with two premises. And the first premise is that there is a uniqueness to the experience of individuals whose families have their origins in slavery that was practiced in the United States. And second, that is the community that merits reparations from the United States government. So those are the two premises that I agree with. I think there are lots of other things that some members of those movements say that I don't necessarily agree with. And there's another group that's worth mentioning who's involved in this, or two others. One is a group that calls themselves the Descendants of Freedmen, and another is the National Assembly on reparations for enslaved and for persons who have ancestors who were enslaved in the United States. And I fundamentally agree with those two principles that I just mentioned, and I think those are principles that are shared by all of these groups.
You were often associated, though, specifically with the ADOS group, with the work of Antonio Moore and Yvette Carnell. Are you affiliated with that?
I doubt if either one of them would associate me with their current activities.
Not anymore. Yeah, that was going to be my question. What happened? It seemed like they were at one point. You all were working together. It seemed like, and more recently, I've seen critiques and even allegations that you're sort of trying to undermine or co-opt the movement. What happened there?
I really don't know. It's somewhat of a mystery to me, and I'm still reeling a little bit because I think I've been consistent in being fully committed to the cause of reparations.
Are you hopeful at this moment that we will see a pivot? You know, I've looked at this issue for a very long time, not in my professional scholarly work as you have, but I've certainly been an organizer and an activist around this, and we've been talking reparations for decades. We've always wanted it. We've always hoped for it. But from my perspective, this seems like the first time that there's a public appetite for it, that we're not getting rejected out of hand in the public policy arena. Are you hopeful that we'll see reparations in our lifetime?
Well, I'm not sure if I'll live long enough to see it happen, but I think that we're in a position that's more propitious than any that I've ever experienced while I've been on this planet. And I think it's a debt that's owed that has been overdue for 156 years. So the question is whether or not the climate is more suitable today for making the move towards full and comprehensive reparations. And I'll say this, here are some grounds for optimism. In the year 2000, about 4% of white Americans were willing to indicate that they supported reparations for Black Americans. By the year 2018, that percentage had risen to about 16. And today, the most recent surveys that I've seen indicate that that percentage is closer to 30. So still not in a position that would lead us to be able to enact a reparations program at the congressional level, but a far better situation than the one that existed at the start of the current century, and one that's promising about prospects for reparations becoming a reality, hopefully in the near future.
Absolutely. Well, we keep fighting, we keep pushing, and hopefully we'll see a victory. And when the final story on reparations is told, and I do believe we will be victorious in this struggle, your work will certainly be a key part of that historical conversation. Sandy, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Everybody, make sure you join the conversation. We want to hear from you. So head over to our BNC Instagram and Twitter pages. Let us know how you feel. Also visit our website, bnc.tv. Also, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube page to check out clips from the show.